Keir Starmer is coming under increased pressure over his position on Gaza as more and more senior members of the party have broken ranks to call for a ceasefire. Amongst them are London Mayor Sadiq Khan, Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar, and Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham. Writing in The Independent, Burnham also had some advice for the Labour leader. He's told Starmer not to call party members who are demanding a ceasefire disloyal. The Labour Party's official position is to call for a, quote, humanitarian pause to allow supplies and aid to enter the Gaza Strip. It's the exact same line as the government's, and it's what the United States has been saying too. But it's causing deep disquiet in the party. Over the weekend, 13 Labour frontbenchers came out publicly in favour of a ceasefire. They include Starmer loyalists like Kim Ledbetter and Jess Phillips, while a further 100 Labour MPs are also calling for him to shift his position. That's on top of the councillor resignations that have now taken place over Starmer's hardline stance. At least 29 have stepped down since Starmer backed Israel's siege on Gaza on LBC 2 weeks ago. But according to Lee Harpin, the position isn't changing. So he tweeted this: senior Labour sources pointed out tonight, A, Keir Starmer is 20% ahead in the polls. B, he has just enjoyed 2 notable election victories, or by-election victories. C, position on Israel, Hamas isn't shifting. And D, position on crisis displays an understanding of how a PM expected to behave. Now, that final point about how a PM is expected to behave has become a familiar line of late. We often hear shadow ministers saying that because they'll soon be in government, they can't possibly take a position on war crimes. That could impact what they do in government, and we wouldn't want that. We wouldn't want them to have their hands tied so as they couldn't back war crimes in government. Right? It's not the kind of thing you can commit to in opposition if you're serious about government. It doesn't have to be this way, though. There is an alternative. Spain's social rights minister, who's also a Podemos member, Ione Belarra, has shown how.
Hoy estamos aquí acompañando a toda la gente decente de nuestro país y también a toda esa gente en toda Europa que quiere pedir y exigir que termine de una vez por todas este genocidio planificado, esta limpieza étnica al pueblo de Palestina que está llevando adelante el Estado de Israel. Pensamos que en este momento los líderes europeos, incluido el nuestro, no está a la altura de la gravedad de las circunstancias. No queremos ser cómplices de este genocidio planificado y pensamos que Europa tiene que actuar con urgencia. Creo que Europa va a pagar muy cara esta hipocresía. La hipocresía de ir pregonando los derechos humanos en todo el mundo y después, cuando hay que dar la cara, cuando hay que estar a la altura, no hacer absolutamente nada. La ciudadanía está estupefacta, viendo cómo se supeditan a los intereses de Estados Unidos y del Estado de Israel todo el posicionamiento de la Unión Europea. Podemos hacer algo y podemos hacerlo hoy mismo. Suspender las relaciones diplomáticas con Israel, aplicar sanciones económicas ejemplares contra Netanyahu y toda la cúpula política, también llevar a cabo un embargo de armas y, por supuesto, llevar a Netanyahu ante la Corte Penal Internacional para que se le juzgue como lo que es, un criminal de guerra.
So who you heard speaking there is the leader of Podemos. They're the junior partner in government with the socialists in Spain. I mean, Aaron, watching that, on one level, on every level, I was incredibly impressed. I think it's a brilliant statement, especially from someone in government. I think it sort of, people I think have been wondering, what was the point in Podemos? They don't seem to be as radical as they once suggested. They haven't completely transformed the economy of Spain. But I think to have someone in government saying that kind of thing, to me, kind of makes the whole thing worth it. On another level, though, it makes me sad, right? And the reason I say this is because I think if every government in Europe said that right now, the Israel-Palestine crisis could be solved within a year, right? If there were people who were willing to say, look, we're not going to tolerate this. You have to get to the negotiating table. Israel, you can't have all the power. You are going to have to find a solution which is mutually agreeable to everyone who lives between the river and the sea. Oh, God, I said it. I said between the river and the sea, right? If there were serious governments who are willing to take an independent approach to this and say, well, actually, we're going to have a moral position here, which is that you can't just bomb these people indiscriminately who you've occupied for decades, right? We are going to be a neutral broker. We are going to try and make sure that the powerless have a bit more power so that you can come to a solution which is, sustainable, not one whereby you're just imprisoning millions of people and hoping for the best, right? I think if every government in Europe said what that Podemos leader said, this crisis could be over in a year. And it's just such a shame that hasn't happened. It could happen, right? Well, why do we have to toe the line of the United States?
Well, it's a great question, Michael. And again, a big part of the project around Keir Starmer and removing the Labour left was about ensuring that criticism of Atlanticist US-led foreign policy could never be centre stage in this country again. That was the point. If you think that Keir Starmer was going to become Labour leader and somehow the Labour Party was going to keep a remotely, morally coherent foreign policy, which in any way dissented from the United States, you have absolutely no idea about how British politics has worked since not even since 1945, since 1940. You have no idea. You shouldn't be voting in internal Labour elections because you're not informed. If anybody seriously thought that Keir Starmer could become the Labour leader and there'd be anything resembling a humane, coherent foreign policy, you just don't know anything about parliamentary politics or the history of the Labour Party. Look, you know what? It's more fun. Stick with football. Go laugh at Man United. Go share memes of Andre Onana being able to make a save. Okay? Share TikToks of Harry Maguire. You don't know what you're talking about. If you thought that Keir Starmer could be anything but this, right? The point of the Starmer project is for British foreign policy to do zero until the White House tells them what to do. They say jump, we say how high. That was the point of the project. A lot of people, powerful people in this country, the major misgivings they had around Corbynism and Corbyn wasn't about the domestic agenda. They can deal with that, okay? You weather it out. You hit the guy with bad media for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Fine. But on foreign policy, if you have a senior member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is what Britain is, in any way dissenting from the line of the United States, that would be huge. It would be huge. It cannot happen. It is not allowed. And that was, I think, the principal reason around why the establishment reacted to Corbyn in the way they did, and the principal reason that Starmer was elevated so quickly in the manner that he was. Now, of course, I'm talking just about the UK, but there's others too. Von der Leyen, Ursula von der Leyen, European Commission head honcho. Nobody votes for her, except for some people in the European Parliament ratify or whatever. Nobody actually votes for her. 500 million Europeans don't vote for this woman to go around the world and flying here, there, and everywhere, pontificating on what's what. Nobody votes for her. But apparently it's this democratic organization, the European Union, so good, fantastic, so progressive. Von der Leyen is doing all this without any concern for actual scrutiny or accountability. Or why is she doing that? I've talked about Starmer. Well, you have a continent-wide transnational political class. Centre-left, centre-right, centre. What does von der Leyen want to do after she's finished this job? I guess she probably wants to go work for NATO. Maybe she'll go work for the World Trade Organization. Maybe she'll go work for the World Bank or the IMF, like Christine Lagarde. Kaja Kallas in Estonia. What does she do after she leaves politics? Well, she'll probably go into some form of political consultancy, like the recent New Zealand Prime Minister. Or again, she might go into this alphabet soup of international organizations. And to have those kinds of jobs, again, you can't dissent from the line, which is really the existing state of things as they are. If you're going to be bold enough to even criticize something, heaven forbid, try and solve a problem, you will not be lined up for a plum job at the IMF, WTO, World Bank, OECD, God knows where. That's what these people want. They want political non-jobs. And of course she wants a political non-job. The one time she had a political job, when she was German Defense Secretary, they were doing training drills, the German army, using broomsticks. Okay, that's how poorly equipped they were. When she was running things, she made a disgrace of herself in the domestic German political arena. So she was moved not just sideways, she was moved up. Okay, you can run the European Commission now. It's a little job after all. So that to me is a big reason why we had this failure, Michael. And look, people know this. I'm a skeptic of the European Union, and this is a big reason why. We create a distant, detached political class who are in no way in touch with their domestic populations. You think Ursula von der Leyen represents working class, blue collar Germans, middle class Germans? You think that? I've got news for you. No, she doesn't. Okay, Macron does the things he does with regards to Russia or China. You might agree or disagree. He does them because he knows ultimately the median French voter thinks a certain way. They want to maximize the economic interests of France, right? Or they want to minimize the possibility of a transcontinental war. right? So Macron's going to behave in a certain way that von der Leyen doesn't have to. So for me, it's a big reason why, Michael, I've used this word before, people hate it because it sounds reminiscent of the online right, the Eurocucks. And those are the people we have running Europe. You know, you had Nord Stream being blown up. We don't know by who. Well, we don't know. Of course, we know who blew up, right? We have a pretty damn good idea who blew it up, or at least on whose authority it was blown up. This is a key piece of infrastructure in Europe with regards to hydrocarbons and energy security. Is exactly the kind of thing that an elected politician should care about. Cheap energy bills for your constituents. But the Eurocucks don't care. They don't want to make any noise. They don't want to upset anybody. Because if they do, they won't work for the World Bank, the IMF, WTO, OECD. So you basically have a continent on autopilot. And not making the big decisions, not addressing the challenges. And even when they say they make the big decisions, look at Olaf Scholz, we're going to rearm Germany, tens of billions to rearm. Nothing happens, they don't do anything. It's bullshit. Because Olaf Scholz knows he can leave in 2-3 years and he'll do a von der Leyen. That option is there. So European politics is in a bad state. And by the way, I have to say this because we don't talk about it nearly enough in the UK. Britain, I think, is in a better place. Britain is in a better place than Europe, mainland Europe. And it's going right at a very quick pace for a reason.
When you said, people don't like this phrase, I was expecting it to be something I'd maybe heard before. I wasn't expecting Eurocucks to come out. But it seems like a perfectly reasonable analysis to me. And I mean, we're not in the European Union, but in terms of if what that means is just completely deferring to establishment power, then that is exactly what we can say about Keir Starmer, right? I mean, he is very explicit. You keep hearing sort of shadow cabinet members on television sort of saying explicitly, we said it basically as soon as America said it. We called for a humanitarian pause right after Joe Biden called for it. Like, they're proud of it. Like, they're proud of the fact that we were just waiting for what America said and then we said the same thing. Isn't that clever? It's like, for one, it's not clever, and two, it's definitely not clever to say it, right? Oh, by the way, we're just agreeing with whatever Joe Biden says. I mean, I suppose in a way that's to prove to, I suppose, the people they're trying to convince that they are not going to have an independent voice in foreign policy. Maybe actually, I hadn't really thought about it this way before, but we talk about this in terms of sort of taxation and business, whereby Keir Starmer isn't really saying he's not going to increase taxes on the rich as a sort of electoral ploy, because that's a popular opinion, basically, in all constituencies around the country. There's some rich people who don't want it, but it's a majority opinion to increase taxes on the rich. But what he is doing is he's signaling to the business elite that they're safe with Starmer. And I think here, by them saying, we're not going to say anything that the Americans haven't said, obviously that's not for elected. The public don't think that's a strong, impressive thing to say. Oh, we're waiting for the Americans to say whatever, and then we agree with them. That seems weak to the public, but it does seem reassuring to the foreign policy and military establishment. So I suppose maybe that's what we're seeing here. It's pure signalling. It just so happens to have led the Labour Party into a position where they are endorsing war crimes and endorsing the indiscriminate bombings of homes filled with multi-generations of the same family. People where 20, 30 members of the same family are dying. And it's not because Keir Starmer hasn't called for a ceasefire. Obviously, if he called for a ceasefire, that wouldn't stop this. But that is the kind of thing that Labour and all of these politicians around Europe are sort of willing to endorse because they don't want to rock the boat. And I do think it is pretty disgraceful.